Hello, this is State Representative Rob Martwick, and I'm coming to you with another episode of my little video series that I call Straight Talk and Common Sense Solutions. Today is Tuesday, August 29th, and it's the day after the House of Representatives took up a vote on education funding. And this was a historic vote, and it is going to, for the first time in about 20 years, change the way that we fund education. And this is something that has been talked about and has been desired from all sides for a long time. And so it got done. And there's a lot in that bill, and I want to go over it and talk to you about how it affects you. There's much good. I think there's some bad. You might agree or disagree. You might agree or disagree on what's good and what's bad, but I think there's a little bit of everything, and that's why this bill is definitely a compromise. And I did not vote for it, but I will tell you that there's a lot of good in it, and we'll talk about why I didn't vote for it in a minute. But it did pass the House of Representatives. It's in the Senate today. I imagine it will pass today, and the governor intends to sign it. So let's talk about the background, right? Years of debate over this issue. Fix the formula, provide equity. What does that mean? Well, for years in Illinois, we've had a system that everyone agreed, whether you were rich or poor, upstate or downstate, suburban or city, Democrat or Republican, you agreed that this system was not fair. It inequitably funded the people who needed funding the most, the students who needed the most, leaving them with a disadvantage in their educational opportunities. This last 2.5 years, the debate really intensified, and we came up with what was called the evidence-based model, the EBM. And everyone agreed, once again, that this was the best way to go about funding education. It took into account lots of variables and data, including your ability of your local area, your local school district, to provide the education for you, the wealth that you had in, the property wealth that you had in there, how much you were hamstrung by certain restrictions on your ability to raise funds at the local level, and then we were supposed to account for that in the formula, and that's exactly what goes on with the evidence-based model. As many of you know from a recent video, that accumulated into a bill that we called SB 1 that the governor subsequently vetoed, and after he vetoed it, he spent months traveling around the state saying that SB 1 was nothing more than a Chicago bailout because it provided money for Chicago's pension problem. And of course, as everyone knows, that Chicago is on a very different system than the state of Illinois. And so while every citizen in Illinois, including those from Chicago, fund the teacher pensions in every other place in Chicago, only Chicago residents fund the teacher pensions in Chicago. And that was unfair. So Chicago residents were paying twice, once for their teachers, once for everybody else. Everyone else was only paying once. So SB 1 accounted for that in the formula. Everyone who was anyone agreed that that was the right way to go about it. The governor issued his mandatory veto that stripped out some of the things that put Chicago on equal footing with the rest of the state. Everyone who was anyone said it's not a bailout. That was unequivocally proven as a falsity, and no one backed his plan. Everyone backed SB 1. Nonetheless, in order to override the governor's veto, you needed 71 votes. There are 67 Democrats. Only 62 people voted for the original bill. We realized that there was no way we were going to override the governor's veto. And that left the schools in Illinois potentially without funding, and even though they've just opened or just about to open, facing shutdowns by the end of September, early October. That would have been a bad situation. So, the four legislative leaders, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the Republican leader of the House, the Republican leader of the Senate, and the governor's office sat down and worked out a compromise. And that passed the House and it passed the Senate. So let's talk about what that compromise legislation is. So first of all, despite the governor's incessant rantings and my Republican colleagues that SB 1 was nothing more than a bailout for the city of Chicago, most of SB 1, almost in its entirety, is in this bill. So if you're an SB 1 proponent, you would say that's a good thing. There is parity for Chicago teacher pensions. I missed one, I'm sorry. It is the evidence-based model. We knew that was going to make it in any form. So it's most of SB1. It's got the evidence-based model, parity for Chicago teacher pensions. Imagine this, the amount of money that actually goes to CPS in this compromise legislation, despite the governor's objection to bailing out Chicago, increases to $466 million. If you're a Chicago resident or a parent of a Chicago public school student, that's good news. That goes a long way towards solving the immediate financial problems of the Chicago public schools. So that's really good stuff. And it keeps a per district, not per pupil, hold harmless. This means that as districts gain or lose students, they won't unfairly take advantage or lose money. So it will keep everyone in a hold harmless, meaning no one gets less, everyone gets more. What else is in there that wasn't in the original SB1? Well, number one is mandate relief. People always talk about local school districts being hampered by unfunded mandates. These are laws that the state of Illinois passes that says you must follow, but we're not going to give you any money in order to comply with them. So local school districts don't like them, but there's a reason for them, right? We want everyone to be on the same path. What kind of mandate relief did we give them? Number one, reduction in physical education and driver's education, so they don't have to do as much as they did before. Still have to provide it, but not as much. And a streamlined process for other relief. So we're going to speed up that process of them appealing what they owe, right? Or what they have to follow, I should say. So that is, so you think about it, we're still talking largely Senate Bill 1, right? And this, for all of us who are Senate Bill 1 proponents, this is great. So what's the catch, right? How does the governor of the state of Illinois, and the Republicans, who railed on over and over and over again that SB1 was nothing more than a Chicago bailout, how do they agree to what was in SB1 plus more money for the Chicago public schools? And that brings us to the last portion, and probably the most controversial portion of this bill, the scholarship tax credit. What is this? Well, it's been called vouchers, okay? And it's not a voucher. This is not a voucher system. I'm here to say it, unequivocally not a voucher system. However, it does basically the same thing, okay? So, what do I mean by that? Ultimately, it transfers money that was public funds to private institutions for education purposes. So it takes money out of the state coffers and gives it to private educational organizations. Just keep in mind, we spent 2.5 years arguing over a budget where we couldn't afford to solve our budget problem. We raised taxes on every individual in the state of Illinois, but now we're going to transfer $75 million to private institutions. So what does this do? It creates tax credits for corporations and individuals who donate to scholarship granting organizations. These are called SGOs, scholarship granting organizations. They're nonprofit 501c3s. They must put 95% of the money that they raise towards scholarships. Only 5% can be used for administrative stuff. That's all good stuff, okay? SGOs then grant scholarships to students for K-12 education to attend private, religious, or out-of-district public schools, okay? So that's what scholarship tax credits do. Students apply to the SGO. When the SGO says they're qualified, then they apply to a private school, and upon the acceptance to the private school, if they've been qualified for their scholarship, they get the scholarship money from the SGO and it goes to the school. Okay? The amount of the scholarship that students are eligible for ranges from $6,000 to $12,000 per year. Okay? So let's talk about who qualifies for these scholarships. Now, the first thing that when people hear this, they think, well, I send my kid to Catholic schools, I'm immediately going to be able to get money from the state to pay for that Catholic school education. And the answer is maybe, maybe. So first of all, in order to qualify, your family income must be less than 300% of the level of poverty. Okay? What does that mean? $72,900 for a family of 4. If you make $73,000 and you total family income from all sources and you have 4 children, you do not qualify. By and large, this means Chicago police officers, Chicago firefighters, people who are skilled laborers, generally 2-income families, are not going to qualify for that credit. You do not get one, period. You don't get anything. Okay? Additionally, there is a strong preference shown to lower income, right? So 185% or of poverty, 185% of the poverty level or less goes first in line. So that means family of four making $42,000 or for students in failing schools, right? So these are the preferences that are shown. So if you are living in a district where, on the northwest side, in my district, say for instance, you attend Pressing, which is not anywhere near a failing school, it's a very succeeding school, and you make $73,000 with 2 children, total family income, you do not qualify. If you make $72,900, you do qualify, but the preference is shown to these students. So it's only if there's any scholarships left that you'll be last in line, which is not likely that there'll really be anything left. The vast majority of these are going to go to lower income families, and then they're going to work their way up. The scholarship amount is based on income. Again, $42,000 family of four, you would qualify for a $12,000 scholarship. Between these two levels, $57,000, you would qualify for a $9,000 scholarship for your child, and again, up to $73,000, you would qualify for a $6,000 scholarship for your student. So if you're a student, again, if you're a family of four making $72,900 and you actually qualify for a scholarship and there's actually one available, and you're sending your son to or daughter to, let's say, St. Ignatius, which I believe is about $16,000 a year, you would get $6,000, you'd still be on the hook for $10,000. So that's how those work. So there's two portions of it. Remember, this is a tax credit program. So this is the scholarship end of it. The money is raised by giving tax credits to people who make donations to these scholarship granting organizations, tax credits. So what a tax credit is it is a reduction in the amount of taxes you owe. So if at the end of the year you owe, let's say to the state of Illinois, $5,000, you can wipe that out with $5,000 in credits by making a donation to a scholarship granting organization. And then you owe the state of Illinois nothing, zero, okay? So let's talk about who qualifies for the tax credits, all right? So who can get these tax credits? Both corporations and individuals can get them. So corporations are entitled to get this credit. It is on a first-come, first-served basis, okay? So, and there's a cap. There's a cap of $75 million. I don't think I have that in there. There's a cap of $75 million. So once $75 million in tax credits have been granted, you're not eligible, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. You have to apply to the Department of Revenue, Illinois Department of Revenue, to get the credit. And here, this is a big provision. There's a $1 million cap on the donation. That's right, $1 million cap on the donation. So an individual or corporation can donate up to $1 million and get a 75% tax credit or a $750,000 credit against taxes owed to the state of Illinois. So again, if a corporation owes $750,000, they were planning on doing $1 million in charitable giving, they can give all that to an SGO, and now they owe the state of Illinois zero, zilch, nada, nothing. Okay? Same thing for very wealthy individuals, depending on what they've made. For instance, the governor of the state of Illinois made $188 million. You can calculate out what he owed, but he can wipe out $750,000 of that by making a $1 million donation to a scholarship granting organization. So, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, listen, I'm a product of private, public, and Catholic education. I went to all three of them, and there are merits in all of them. And I had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful education in Catholic schools. So I will tell you that I think that there is probably some good, right? And let's talk about what people say is some of the good in here. Number one, it provides a process where low-income students can qualify for and receive scholarship money to attend the school of their choice. So a lot of people who think, well, I'm low income, I'm stuck in my neighborhood, my school is not good, my kid's not getting a good education, I can't afford to go elsewhere, this provides choices. A lot of people think that's a good idea. It provides incentives for donations to these programs by granting this tax credit, right? So it provides an incentive for people to donate to schools. There is a $75 million cap, so it's not unlimited. And there's a 5-year sunset on this program, which means that after 5 years, this program goes away unless we renew it by act of the legislature. All of that's good. But like everything we do, nothing is all good. There's two sides of every issue. So let's talk about the bad, right? This is a huge tax break for the wealthiest people, okay? people that would have been required to send money to the state to provide for whatever the state provides for, education, public safety, human services, healthcare, right? We've just created a way for them to avoid that. It's also a huge tax break for corporations who can do the same thing. And trust me when I say this, there is a big gaping hole in this. The middle class gets nothing out of this program. Remember, $75 million in tax credits can be granted, and the maximum donation that you can make is $1 million. That's 75 people. There are 75 millionaires who could very easily scoop this thing up. First come, first served basis. My prediction, we'll see if I'm right, is that when this credit becomes available on January 1st, 2018, I'm willing to bet right now that this will not be available 24 hours after it's opened. I'm willing to bet that the moment the governor signs this into law, that corporations and the wealthiest individuals will begin the process, and they will be first in line, and they will scoop this up. So if you are a middle-class person and you attend a fundraiser and you write a $1,000 check and you think you're going to get $750 off of your taxes, my guess is that by the time you do that in April or August or November, that those tax credits will have all been scooped up and there'll be nothing available for you. Also, if you're in the middle class, your kids are not going to qualify for this scholarship. So if you're middle class and you're scraping by, you're making a family income of $75,000, $80,000, and you're trying to send your kid to Loyola spending $16,000 on the tuition, that's a tough nut to swallow. You will get nothing out of this program. I talked about a 5-year expiration on this. I'm also willing to predict right now that it's more likely that this will expand rather than expire. Now imagine this scenario. This is about 6,000 scholarships a year, potentially more. There are going to be in 5 years 6,000 kids who are going to private schools that are being paid for by a voucher from the state, a scholarship from using this public money, and we're just going to say, no, you don't get a scholarship, you can't go to that school anymore. There will be more people organized, not only trying to preserve this program, but mark my words, they will be trying to expand it. What's the consequence of that? This diverts money from public to private schools. This is money that would go to the general fund that people owe in taxes, and we're letting them take that money instead of sending it to the state of Illinois like they're currently required. They get to send it to private education. What's the downside of that? Well, now we're going to get to the point where I tell you why it is I ultimately voted no. I can find a lot of good in this. I heard from a lot of people about how this is a good thing, and I think that there is good in it. There's no doubt about it. But there was a real problem with the way that this thing happened. Okay? Number one, I talked in the very beginning about how we've had years of discussion on funding, on changing the school funding, the way that we do it, the formula. At no time was a scholarship tax credit, a voucher program, ever considered. It was never made it to a hearing. It never made it to a bill. It wasn't part of the Democratic proposal. It wasn't part of the Republican proposal. And it wasn't part of the governor's veto. And yet at the very last minute, a profound change to the way that we fund education made it into the bill that is ultimately going to become law. Without ever having a committee hearing, without ever hearing expert testimony on what this program will do and will not do, we passed it. We passed it in the cover of darkness, and that's not the way you make profound change. People should have the right to have public discourse before profound change is made in their state. That's number one. Number two, we are giving $75 million away. Now let's talk about that. We just raised taxes from 3.75 to 4.95%. Everybody knows that. Who did I raise taxes on? Who did we raise taxes on? Everybody in the state of Illinois got a tax increase. Did we institute a progressive income tax where wealthy individuals pay more than people who can't afford it? No, it's a flat income tax. Everyone got an increase. And even with that increase, we have the lowest number of state employees per capita, we cut that by 5%, meaning we just fired a bunch of people, laid them off from their jobs. Number two, after years of decimating our public universities, our state universities, we just gave them a 10% cut. Translation, we fired more people. We passed a formula that puts us on the path to more equitably funding education, But do we fund it equitably? No. Why? Because we don't have enough money. We are dead last in funding K through 12 education in the entire country. Dead last. Last for funding K through 12 education in the whole country. How do we make our new formula work better? Put more money into it. Are we putting more money into it? No, we're not. Right? What are we doing? We're diverting that money to private schools. We can't afford to properly fund our pensions, which is creating a growing debt. We cannot afford to pay our backlog of bills that we've accumulated while we had a 2.5-year budget impasse, and yet we're giving away money. Ladies and gentlemen, this is like the person who can't afford their rent spending a Friday in the corner bar buying rounds for people. Okay? You don't do this. This is so fiscally irresponsible, I cannot believe that this was even considered. It's not that it's a bad idea, but this is something you do when you are at the middle or higher in terms of the way that you fund education. You have a handle on your debts and you're running budget surpluses. We have an extremely tight budget, massive debt, and we're not even funding education at the minimum level, and yet we found it in our hearts to give away $75 million a year for 5 years, and mark my words, it will grow. It's not that it's a bad thing to do, it's that it's the wrong thing to do right now. We are stripping money away from public education, which means that the kids that are left in these public schools are going to have less options. Everyone says that $75 million didn't come out of the money that we funded education, but that's a falsity, because it's $75 we could have put towards it. And even if we had put that $75 million towards public education, we would still be underfunding it profoundly. So why are we giving it away? It makes no sense. A tax cut for the wealthiest, the middle class gets nothing, and we put our state in a worse financial position without addressing what we need to do, which is our core responsibilities as state government. That's why I voted no. Now, I won't say it's all bad. As I said in the beginning, this is going to get some much needed influx of cash to the Chicago public schools. They can right their ship, maybe begin to address some of their problems. I know that there are a lot of people happy about this. The mayor was for it. A lot of people were for it. So I hope, once again, when I make a decision, this was a principled decision. I felt that this was the wrong thing to do, and I kept my vote a no. But I am, as always, hopeful that I'm wrong and that this is really overall a great thing. But time will tell, and that is, in a nutshell, the straight talk and the common sense about school funding reform. So, as always, if you have questions, comments, criticisms, by all means, respond here or send me an email. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we took a little bit of break while we were focused on this, but we'll get back to weekly video updates about other important issues that the state of Illinois faces. So thanks again for your time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.